Chag Sameach. This year's Pesach and this year's Seder will undoubtedly be strange. For many, it will be lonely, as we won't be able to share stories and experiences and words of Torah with our closest loved ones, family, and friends. And it hurts particularly deep because Pesach is the most beloved Jewish holiday celebrated by more Jews than any other. And throughout history, there have been so many stories that have been involving difficult circumstances in Pesach, from secret seders while hiding from the Romans, to hiding matzah ovens in Poland while the Nazis patrolled right outside, to a story that I heard just this past week of a Union soldier who during the American Civil War was invited as a guest to a Confederate family's Seder, and so many more stories just like that. And we know well the stories of those who risked their lives while imprisoned and impoverished and in concentration camps, and their resilience and sacrifice to try to celebrate this special holiday. But this year, those challenges are felt so much closer to home as we watch as the world has come together to fight against an invisible enemy who is ruthless and has already taken the lives of so many. And as we sit alone this Pesach, it's easy to feel a sense of despair, to feel a dark cloud hanging over us as we try to muster up the excitement and the enthusiasm that makes Pesach so special. How can we sing Halach Ma'anya, that this is the bread of affliction, and say Kol dichvin yetei ve'echol, that let all that are hungry, let them all come and eat, when we know that this year that there are no guests for Pesach, that we're going to be alone for Pesach? How realistic does it sound to invite others from the inside of our home where nobody can hear or take us up on the invitation from the outside? What does it even mean when we say on a regular year, Kol dichvin yetei ve'echol, let all that are hungry come and eat? And this question actually bothered many of the commentaries throughout the ages. For instance, the Ritva explains that we say this even though we're not really inviting anybody, to display that we are actually free people. And while in Egypt, you see, we never had the option to have guests, and so instead, we symbolically invite others to join us at the Seder. And in fact, some even suggest that there's a practice to open the door while reciting Halach Manya, so that the invitation actually seems a lot more genuine. And while the Seder has so much symbolism, and I think that this approach makes a lot of sense, maybe there's another way for us to look at this question and our most unique circumstances this year. What does it mean, Kol dichvin yetei ve'echol? What do we mean when we say all those who are hungry, let them come and eat? And the Mishnah in Pesachim teaches us that afilu ani sheb'Yisrael lo yochal ad she'esav, that even a poor man needs to do haseba, needs to recline before they eat matzah. And the Medrash explains that the source for this Mishnah actually comes from a rather unlikely source. It comes from the very beginning of Parshas Beshalach, where the Torah tells us, Vayasev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar Yam Suf, that God led the Jewish people in a roundabout way. And the Mishnah is learning the idea of haseba, of reclining, from the very same root of vayasev. And yet, what then is the connection between a poor person leaning and this moment of vayasev, of Exodus? And when we look at the story, we see just how bleak things really were for the Jewish people, how the prospects for survival were grim. There was no natural way for them to cross the Yam Suf. It seemed as if the Egyptians were going to either kill them or drag them back into slavery. And yet God performs a great miracle in an instant and saves the Jewish people by splitting the sea. And Rav Hirsch explains that the Mishnah is stressing that a poor person might feel that reclining, that it's pointless. After all, how can he possibly feel royal in a current impoverished state? And the answer is that he needs to look beyond the present and know that salvation, that Yeshua can happen in the blink of an eye, in the same way that it did for the Jewish people, in the same way that they were suddenly and miraculously saved. And despite the outlook of his current life, he, the ani, but also we learn from the Exodus that everything can change in a moment, with God's help. And that, I think, is the message of Kol Dichvin Yetei V'Yechol. We're telling those who are needed to look past the present and to come and eat. We say Kol Ditzrich Yetei V'Yifsach, that those who are dealing with various crises and challenges, they should come over and literally Pasach, pass over their worries on Seder night, and instead look towards the future. We know from Galus Mitzrayim, from our experience in Egypt, that God will one day redeem us, and once again we will celebrate. And our celebration, when we say Halach Ma'anya, and we invite others, what it really is, it's about the future. You see, we might be enslaved at this moment. Hashata Hacha. This year, we might be challenged. We might be alone for Seder, but there will be a time when we will be free. As we say, L'shana haba b'nei chorin. There will be a time when we will all be together. And so this year at the Seder, we're celebrating not just in the present, but very much in the future in mind. The invitation of others to join with us is the highest form of expression of that simcha. And I'm reminded of the story of Pinchas Naamani. And while he might not be exactly a household name, it was exactly 50 years ago that in 1970, that Naamani's Phantom jet was actually shot down by the Syrians over Damascus in a suburb. And for those that remember that incident, you'll remember that Naamani and 2 other Israelis were held captive by the Syrians for 3 years until a prisoner exchange was brokered in 1973. And in his diary, he writes and describes what Pesach was like in the Syrian prison in Damascus. He writes, "It's hard to imagine the holiday atmosphere here. In the morning, we gave the cell a thorough scrubbing, something that concrete floor had never had. We drew a Seder plate on a piece of cardboard with a Magen David in the middle and a different item at each of the star's point. And in the afternoon, we managed to give ourselves baths in ice-cold water. And then we put on our cleanest clothes. And these were difficult hours of soul-searching," he writes. "When you are a prisoner of war, the memories, they rise up and they choke you. You think about home, trying to sense the smells, the holiday feeling at twilight. You know that your family and your children, that the entire Jewish people are waiting. They are hoping while you're still here, tossing and turning helplessly. And time crawls by at its own pace." And he writes that there were 2 Haggadahs and some matzah crumbs that were sent to him by the chief rabbi of Zurich that gave them some feeling of a sense of Passover. Boaz, the youngest, actually sang Manish Tana, and as he did, Pinchas writes that tears welled up in his throat. But then came the singing. And he says it's a strange scene in the most heavily guarded prison of an enemy state, that 3 Israeli prisoners are singing songs of the ancient holiday of liberty. And he says that while we were still celebrating and reading the Haggadah, the guards, they appeared and they demanded that we stop. It seemed as if our singing had maybe disturbed the inmate in the next cell, but we refused to stop. And even when threatened to throw us into solitary confinement, we didn't stop. For even that awful threat, it could not silence the sound of freedom. Friends, we may not have our quote-unquote normal Seder this year, but nothing can silence the sound of our freedom. The simcha that we have in celebrating and knowing that God has redeemed us before and that he will continue to provide us with Yeshua and salvation. And this year we look not just towards the future to find that inspiration, but if we look closely enough, if we look like Pinchas Naamani, everything we need to make this Seder and this Pesach meaningful and inspiring, it's right in front of us. All of our Seders this year, they can all be filled with learning and song and positivity and appreciation for the blessings that we have, even if we might be alone. But please God, next year, we will have the simcha of being together again. And when future generations tell the story of Passover, just maybe, they'll recount that one Pesach when we were isolated from each other, but yet managed to keep it and to be inspired together. And so Orit and Shaya and Nava and Noam join me in wishing you and your family a Chag Kasher V'Sameach. May this be a wonderful and blessed holiday for you and your entire family. Be well.